Hey all, here are OS Reviews. Today we're taking a closer look at the Ace Magician AMR5. This is a pretty interesting high-performance mini PC that comes with a AMD Ryzen 5 4500U processor, which is going to be beefier than the vast majority of other mini PCs we've seen in the past, which have used Intel Atom or Celeron chips that are very entry level. This guy can actually play back games, edit 4K videos, can handle pretty much all the things you want to throw at it. With this type of configuration, it's also going to be a little bit more steep in terms of pricing. So it starts at $499 for the base model, but you can throw in RAM if you have something lying around. Alternatively, you can go up to other configurations. $599 is the one that comes with 16 gigs of RAM and 256 gigs of SSD. Goes all the way up to $730 for a model that has 32 gigs of RAM. Can be taken with you when on the go, plug it into a portable monitor, and you're up and running. AMD's Ryzen 5 and Ryzen 7 line, which have been gaining a lot of traction because of their much improved performance in recent generations. So it's great to see that you have a variety here that doesn't just stick with the usual Intel processor. So I would say one of the rivals to this thing would actually be Beelink's GR7 series, which is another extremely premium flagship grade mini PC that we reviewed last year. However, that model as configured is going to be more expensive than this Ace Magician AMR5, which again is about $100 to $200 less, has Wi-Fi 6, so very fast in terms of internet connectivity, along with RGB backlights on the shell that just glows and makes it look more interesting in the dark. Yet another unique selling point of this model is it has a wheel that you can actually slide through to go through 3 performance tiers. So there's a silent mode, which is going to reduce fan noise, but it's also going to only draw about 10 to 15 watts of power. It's going to be good enough for very basic tasks. And then there is a work mode that will increase the CPU speed, but it gets a little bit louder. And then there's also a gaming mode that cranks it all the way up to 100%. Now the RAM you can also upgrade to hold up to 64 gigs, which is pretty crazy for a PC of this size, and it weighs 581 grams, which is actually pretty lightweight. We have kind of a echo of what the design will be like, and flipping things open, we also have, again, the specs just reiterated. Then underneath the foam, we have the quick user guide, obviously the AMR5 itself, and on the edge here we have just the power adapter, which I will say they are using a kind of barrel plug, but that's pretty much the case with most mini PCs at this point, though it would be nice admittedly if they just chose USB Type-C power delivery, and there's also a HDMI cable that's bundled. Taking a closer look at the design here, it is definitely very striking and distinctive from afar with these sharp angular edges. As aforementioned, I think one of the best selling points here is that this cover is magnetic. Just give it a bit of a pull and you can actually pop it out to quickly access the RAM as well as the SSD that you're able to pop in a second slot to easily upgrade. So it looks like the model that we have here as configured comes with 16 gigs of RAM. Despite this being magnetic, it still very easily pops shut, and when it's closed, it doesn't fall loose or anything like that. Pretty strong magnets. Radeon graphics proudly stamped onto the side. I will say that the main body of the unit, though, is constructed out of a polycarbonate plastic as opposed to aluminum. Still, it doesn't feel hollow or cheap, and just as a quick size comparison, here it is next to an average 6.3-inch phone, so you can see that it is still very compact. It's going to be, of course, a bit thicker, but easy to put into a backpack and just take it with you when on the go. This one does have a few metal accents, including on the aforementioned kind of scroll wheel on the top, which clacks with a satisfying thump whenever you are switching between the 3 performance modes. I think this is a very unique selling point, so the fact that you can easily switch into the silent, auto, and performance modes at a single click, along with the super shiny power key that you can press inwards to turn it on. It is a pretty clever and thoughtful design. Everything here in terms of the mechanics of the buttons does press with a very satisfying click, but this is a huge fingerprint magnet. Although this thing is small, I would say that it's not necessarily the smallest mini PC that we've ever seen. Would be something like the Morphine M6. Here is even slimmer and more pocketable by contrast, but both of these models are examples of much less powerful units that have the aforementioned Intel Celeron chips, so you won't be able to use those for things like serious gaming or video editing. The side has 2 USB 3.0 ports. There is a audio 3.5mm jack. If you don't want to use Bluetooth, there is also a Type-C connector. On the other end, we have 2 more USB 3.0 slots. We also have a display port, full-size HDMI, Ethernet if you don't want to use Wi-Fi, and also the power supply port. That's a pretty good selection of I/O, and in total, you can connect up to 3 external 4K monitors at once. All right, so powering the unit on, immediately the RGB lights flash onto life and they begin to dance around on the front, as well as even on the power key jog dial, along with even the Ace Magician logo at the very top, and has plenty of these unique finer touches that you simply won't find in the really budget mini PCs. Once again, even the back panel here has the same RGB lights which are passing through. Even the color of the dial here is coordinated with the tier that you select. So performance mode is red, versus in the regular kind of auto mode, it's going to be green, and then in the blue mode, it's the silent mode where you won't hear the fan kick in at all. So it shows a lot of attention to detail. Sleep mode, it will flash red, as you can see there, to give you kind of this gentle rhythm to remind you that it's not completely powered off yet. Extremely interesting, even as a desk conversation starter. So it does come installed with Windows 11. Here's also a quick demo of what it sounds like with the fan activated. This is pretty much as loud as the computer will get. So indeed, in the performance mode, it's not going to be completely silent, but it only kicks in when it needs to. By the way, the colors of the RGB lights also start to kind of bleed out from the edges, just making it look extremely cool from all directions that you are looking at this box. And about a minute or two later, voila, we are now in. So a very clean, minimalistic Windows 11 launcher. No bloatware, any pre-installed apps at all, aside from just the standard Microsoft Edge browser, as well as some of the utility tools. So here's kind of the Radeon software, which allows us to tweak the GPU performance as well, based on what types of activities we typically do. And we also have the ability to track on this dashboard how much RAM that we are using. So it seems like in idle mode, about 3 gigs is being occupied, as well as the percentage utilization of the graphics, GPU, as well as the CPU. Our model, as configured, has about 436 gigs free after the operating system has been installed, and this is the 512 gig variant. To start off with things like the performance here, like I said, in terms of general navigation, this thing flies, and there's hardly any lag or delays when it comes to just clicking around the UI. Everything feels wicked fast. And when we start looking into the specs, that's also pretty consistent as far as mini PC standards are concerned. So here's a quick refresher. Typical chipsets that we see in the $200 to $300 range will be rocking a Celeron N3450. It's extremely popular, and this chipset typically gets us a 1900 pass mark score. Slightly higher end versions, including the N4100, slightly go up to 2400-ish, and then we can up it again. Another common chipset used on these lower cost models has been the J4125, the Beelink GTR7 that we just talked about using the Ryzen 7 3750H is already super fast, but that model has an 8278 pass mark score, and compared to this guy here, the Ryzen 5 4500U is rocking a 11,100 score on Passmark, which is just incredible. And you might be thinking, well, why does the Ryzen 7 have a lower score here than the Ryzen 5? Well, the reason lies with the smaller series number here at the back. We can see that the Ryzen 7 chipset on that Beelink PC was actually a little bit on the lower end within the Ryzen 7 family, and particularly with that architecture, it was a quad-core processor. This Ryzen 5 4500U is a 6-core processor. So we have 2 extra cores in there, which is why the score here is so much higher. So the story here being, don't just see Intel Core i5, i7, or in this case Ryzen 5 or Ryzen 7, and suppose that the lower number will always be slower than the higher number. But we actually have to see, is it part of the same generation of chipsets? Is it part of the same family, but maybe a lower tier out of that family? And if so, we might be surprised to find that something like this Ryzen 5 4500U does outperform that other one in the Beelink GTR7. So again, it is using the similar clock speed, base frequency of 2.3 gigahertz, turbo up to 4 gigahertz. And what's crazy is that this one is drawing even less power than that Ryzen 7. As we can see there, that one has typical 35 watts of power drain. This one here is typical 25 watts, literally 5 to 6 times higher than the budget base entry-level mini PCs that we commonly see. So you're getting not necessarily, I would say, actually 5 times the performance, because that's just benchmarks at the end of the day, but you certainly will tell the difference as you start using it. Everything just feels a lot more responsive, things are faster to open and load, barely any signs of lag, and you just get a much more pleasant experience as you are navigating around. Now also, when I try to run some Octane scores to take a look at how well the web browsing performance is working, quite good. Now this varies a bit from test to test, but I was able to get on average 50,000 to 55,000 Octane score for web browsing, which is excellent. For reference, the Pixelbook has a Octane score of around 31,000, which is considered already very good. So again, this thing will definitely fly when it comes to just navigating around the web. Nothing should really slow it down. So anyways, let's take a quick look at how it actually fares if we just click on something like The Verge. And once again, the loading speeds here are extremely fast, super fluid, no signs of slowdown, 16 gigs of RAM. Again, expandable up to 64 gigs will allow you to do plenty of multitasking. In my particular test here, I have over 10 to 20 tabs open, and things are still held in the system's memory without any issues, as you can see there, just super fast. Coupled with the excellent Wi-Fi reception, which in my case I was consistently getting almost full bars, even though it's an integrated antenna. I think that's one area where using a plastic chassis as opposed to aluminum is actually helping it. So let's jump into playing back some videos, and over here we have a 4K video. Let's actually turn it up, in fact, to 4K, and once again we'll see that I can play this back without breaking a sweat. GPU being more powerful than the typical Intel integrated graphics that we see in a lot of these mini machines, and as a result, that's why this thing is also good enough for things like video editing as well as for a little bit of gaming. And 4K videos, you can see here, is playing along, it's a breeze. We're seeing 0 dropped frames in this 4K video that's being streamed on YouTube, and no lag either in terms of everything is playing without any buffering, regardless of if it's YouTube, Netflix. It won't break a sweat, everything is still wicked fast, and scrolling, everything feels responsive. Again, thanks to that CPU and GPU package that we have on here. And same thing goes with the other tabs that we still have open there in the background. Even more budget mini PCs, to be honest, these days are good enough to handle office tasks. They're considered pretty light on compute power, but on this thing it just flies, even if you're trying to load up really complex documents, let's say ones with larger file sizes. Even if you have an Excel that is close to 1 GB with thousands of rows, things like a bit more demanding Photoshop as well as video and photo editing, it can, of course, like I said, also handle very easily. In my test so far, if I was trying to edit a full HD video, let's say around 10 minutes long, it would easily output that in under 2 minutes, so very fast. Now if you're trying to edit a 4K resolution video that is in the same 10-minute length, it will take a little bit longer, 4 minutes or so, which is still considered excellent. Slicing different video clips together, cutting and trimming things, it all works really fast from a UI perspective. So same thing goes when it comes to Photoshop. Touching up images, it more than handles that with ease. Jumping back into things like the Microsoft Store, so again, it is running Windows 11, so like any other Windows computer, you have access to all of the legacy Windows apps, executables, drivers, millions of apps you can find online, as well as in the store these days. Microsoft, of course, has a few more of these essential, fun apps that they're trying to push, which are a little bit more optimized. The only limiting factor would probably be the built-in storage, which is still pretty good for a mini PC, but like I said, out of the box, you get 512 gigs for the max configuration model, which if you're doing things like Cyberpunk, which just takes tons and tons of memory to download the game, you may end up needing to look for a larger hard drive or storage somewhere. And in fact, if you do want to get into even faster territory, when you look into options such as xCloud from Microsoft, as well as Google Stadia, so that's cloud gaming solutions. So as long as you have a reliable internet connection, it's leveraging even faster hardware on the cloud to give you that experience, but that typically requires a paid subscription. But like I said, the local hardware on here is good enough that really you don't really have to look to those places. So we're seeing Vega 6 and The Witcher that we see here are all playing back here very well in terms of smooth frame rates that don't really get in the way of you enjoying the titles, despite these being all fairly recent, heavier games. Now, granted, we aren't really now connecting it to, let's say, a 4K resolution display, but you get the idea. Right now, these are some tests in around full HD resolution. We're getting about 40 to 60 frames, depending on the title itself. So overall, again, for mini PC standards, this is already excellent, especially considering these are local games that you're playing back on the box itself. So that's more or less it as far as our hands-on review of the Ace Magician AMR5, and like I said, this is a surprisingly capable mini PC. This is something I think that strikes a good balance between portability and power that is sufficient to pretty much do anything that you would really want to do in a computer. And all of this is wrapped up in a pretty stylish and unique looking case, I have to say. You can check out more details if you're interested in the links down below, but for now that's been our video. Thanks for watching here at OS Reviews.